All right, so we're rolling. So if you want to intro that guitar a little bit, it's a really cool story.
Yeah, so this is a guitar I've had probably since '67. A couple of years before I started with Van. And it's the guitar. I think I started using it almost immediately, but on Moondance, Moondance was mostly an acoustic album. So, and I did one electric song on there, the rest is just acoustic. But this one, I started using this on his next album on this guitar. So. Said, oh, Domino, Romeo, Romeo, there you go. I said, oh, Domino, Romeo, Romeo, there you go. I said, oh, oh, Domino. Don't wanna discuss it. I think it's time for a change. You make it disgusting. Stop thinking that I'm kinda strange. In that case, I'll go underground. I'm gonna get me some heavy rest. I will never have to worry, child, about what's worse. What is best? I'm singing, oh, Domino. Roll me over, Romeo, there you go. I said, oh, Domino. Roll me over, Romeo, there you go. That's kind of it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
The first musical sound that I remember hearing up close live would be my dad blowing his horn and putting, my ear up to the bell of his saxophone, and I've never gotten that out of my head.
I think I was in 8th grade, however old you are when you're in 8th grade. I think I was 24. When I was in 8th grade and I was listening to, I always listened to black music.
Okay.
And
R&B, Motown, that kind of thing.
Motown, yeah, funk, soul, whatever. And watching Soul Train. That's right, watching Soul Train. Yeah, and that was that. I don't know, for some reason that I connected with that,
As the story goes, my brother is a singer, and my sister is an actor. So, and they're a little bit older than I am. And there was one Easter Sunday, and my brother had a solo in church. And my whole family came out. My grandparents came out. Everybody came out to to watch my brother do this thing. And on the way home, my grandmother dropped me back home, and I said to her, I could do that.
How old were you?
7. I could do that. Whatever with him, I can do that. She said, oh, really? He's like, yeah, I can do that. She said, show it to me, prove it to me. So I basically sang for my grandmother.
When President Kennedy got assassinated, it put an unbelievable shroud over the country. I mean, you could feel it. I think I was in maybe 4th grade at the time, or 5th grade, but life changed drastically. Our innocence was taken away in November of 1963.
Right.
And it remained, I remember, throughout the holiday season. And then in 1964, one January night, sitting at home with my mom and dad, as you did every Sunday night, watching Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan.
And here comes the Beatles. And 2 things happened. They brought back an excitement and an innocence. And for me, in particular, that was almost a line of delineation where, okay, we can come out of this mourning that we're in, rightfully so. And it just gave, it was something fresh and happy and strange to my parents,
Yes.
But when I heard them on the Ed Sullivan Show, it's like, wow, this would be a cool thing to do.
What was your earliest recollection of wanting to be a guitar player? What was how old were you, and what was it that sparked that?
God, I just watched it a couple of weeks ago. It was the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
Okay.
That was it. That did it. That got me. What was I, 6 years old?
Wow.
Sitting in front of the black and white TV.
Yeah.
And there was just this excitement, and I mean, here these guys,
Different.
They just came in with something different,
Yep.
and then everything else that followed after that. But that was the hook. That's the one that got me.
I was in the 9th grade when the Sapiens, a band called the Sapiens from Newburgh, they were thrown out of high school because their hair was long.
Right.
And that was like a Monday or a Wednesday. Well, that Friday, they gave a dance at the VFW. And that dance was like the Beatles at Shea Stadium, because they were on the front page of the evening news that they were the bad boys of Newburgh that got thrown out because of their hair.
Right.
So there was lots of people that went to see this band, not so much because about the music, just to see who they were. And I remember going to see them, standing in the audience, and I was mesmerized by how good they were. And I focused on the drummer, and I was like, God, I wish I was up there.
My father was a blue-collar guy, and he used to run card games and crap games, dice. And unions would have picnics in the summer, and he would take me to the picnics. They called them clam bakes. And my father would say, okay, listen, I'm going to be out in the woods shooting crap. This is Bob. Every time Bob tells you to sing a song, get up and sing a song. Okay, Dad. So my father would go in the woods, shooting crap, playing cards. And the guy would say, get up and sing a song. I'd sing a song, everybody would clap. And then later he would spin this big wheel. And if you won the number on the wheel, you won 20 silver dollars. Every time I sang a song, he would spin that wheel. Whatever number I had, the wheel was going to stop at a different number, and he would just continue to spin it and make me a winner. So when I was 5 and 6 years old, I was making $20 a shot every song I sang.
It's probably about 6 or 7. Watching some TV shows. Started playing the broom along with the TV shows when I saw bands on TV, and finally got a guitar. My father got me a guitar. It was a friend of his who had one laying around, and they were discussing that I was playing a broom, so that wasn't going to work out too well. So I got a little acoustic guitar with Mel Bay's first book, and that's how I started.
And to help us celebrate on the 4th of July, let's go to the Mets public address announcer at Citi Field, Alex Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and remove your caps as we honor our great nation and all of the men and women who help keep us safe and free with the singing of God Bless America. Please welcome Master Sergeant Mary K. Messenger of the United States Army.
Actually, as a little kid, I always wanted center stage. My brothers used to put me in the middle and say, sing, dance, anything. They were trying to make fun of me, but I actually thought they wanted to hear me. So I would just, whatever the song was at the time, I'd get up and sing. And his friends actually thought it was a pretty good show. They're like, you've got something here. And of course, my brothers would say, yeah, but we'll see how far it goes. The Yankee connection started from a West Point football game. Mm-hmm. I was doing a halftime show, and it wasn't long after 9/11
Mm-hmm.
When the game started up again. And some of the Yankee staff was invited to that particular game that I was singing at.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought it would be perfect to come on down for a game. And never met Mr. Steinbrenner. And they had told me he likes to audition all his national anthem singers.
Oh,
'cause
really?
He's very picky. He doesn't want anybody stylizing it. He wants it done the correct way. Mm-hmm. So the fact that sight unseen, he was taking his employee's word. I was a nervous wreck. Make sure I did everything right. And of course, what do? I step on the N during sound check. The NY, and I see the ground. His name was Tito, real nice guy. Came running over. You're stepping on the N. I'm thinking, oh, my career's over. I didn't even sing a note, but everything worked out well, and I was invited back again. National anthem. I had mentioned to them, anytime you want the God Bless America sung, I can do that too. They're like, well, right now we have somebody, because they don't do a live anthem or God Bless America for every game.
Okay.
It's special games.
Right.
He said, we have Ronan Tynan, the Irish singer.
Oh, okay.
Fast forward, I get a call the night before the band was going down to do the pregame. We called it the pregame national anthem. And Deb Timon from the New York Yankees had asked, can Mary Kay come down and do God Bless America? My commander at the time says, well, this is last minute, but I'll ask her. I'm like, of course, they remembered.
You're right.
And
Oh,
came
wow.
down, went to do God Bless America, and just led into doing a World Series game that had happened to get on TV.
Yes.
And the rest is history.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the microphone behind home plate and welcome the official vocalist of the West Point Band, Master Sergeant Mary K. Messenger.
My father was a musician. He was a district attorney in Poughkeepsie. Oh, wow. And in Dutchess County, and then he became a county judge. Then he became a Supreme Court judge in the state of New York. So. But going back, when he was in college, he went to Villanova, and then he went to Fordham Law School. He put himself through school by playing music. He was a piano player. He was a pretty accomplished piano player, and he played, cut a couple of records actually, and he loved jazz. So I grew up with that, and my mother also was musically inclined. She was an opera singer, and she performed at Carnegie Hall, I think with a choir, not necessarily soloing, but. So I had that, I guess, in the genes.
I started taking classical lessons when I was 7. I think I wanted to play. I honestly don't remember. It was a long time ago. But I took probably 6 years of classical lessons. After a couple years, I kind of stopped playing. My mother actually had the sense to recognize how I was messing around with my sonatinas by turning the book upside down and trying to play them, or syncopating things. So she actually bought me a Muddy Waters record, which really, very strange, because I hadn't really thought about the blues, I don't think. And she wasn't like a particularly into the blues that I know of. Somehow she had the foresight to buy that, and that kind of changed things. I started jamming with a friend, and it just kind of got me out of the classical box, because I was playing classical. That's all I could play. I guess I was good at it for my age, but I couldn't do anything else.
I went to Catholic school, and I started piano there. I studied piano, and then shortly thereafter, Elvis came in. It ended that.
Yes.
And the nuns didn't like the fact that I was into Elvis.
Is that right?
And that's when it started. It started my guitar thing, because of Scotty Moore and Elvis.
Right.
But Chet too. Chet Atkins was one of my early influences, and never looked back, really.
Day of judgment, God is calling. On the knees, oh, pigs calling. Begging mercy for their sins. Satan laughs and spreads his wings. Oh, Lord, yeah.
I am from New Paltz, New York. I am 13. The first record I ever heard was probably either an Elton John record or Pink Floyd, one of those. Like when I started listening to rock, my dad brought me in with a lot of Elton John, the Beatles, and Pink Floyd. When I really started performing, I was probably about 10. I moved away from just open mic nights and got introduced to different bands, and that's when I started realizing I wanted to be in a band. So we brought together our own band, started playing little gigs, and then we eventually just brought up music and decided that we really wanted to play.
I was 3 years old. It was Christmas '89, and I got my first ever drum kit. It was a natural wood Ludwig concert tom kit. It was a 12 rack, 16 floor tom with a 22 kick. And that was, I remember it, and that was my first drum kit. My father's a drummer. My father was doing a lot of recording with his original band, so that was playing around the house all the time. He had a studio downstairs. He rehearsed with them, so I listened to a lot of his music, believe it or not, and I also all the classic rock, like the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, Aerosmith.
Do you remember the smallest venue you ever played? Yes, it was in Poughkeepsie, New York. I love Poughkeepsie, yeah? At a club called the Last Chance Saloon, and there was tumbleweed in the alleyway. Oh my God! And 3 people turned up. Really? No, this is the police? There were 3 of us on stage, and 3 people in the audience, but they were in different parts of the theater. It's like one up here. I said, guys, just come down to the front, and I introduced them to each other. Just stand together and pretend to be. And we did our show. And we got 5 encores.
We did play in Poughkeepsie on that tour, and it has sort of in time become legendary. We were at this place called the Last Chance Saloon, aptly named, and there were only 4 people there, and it was like, well, not really worth bothering. But that, we had the spirit at the time. We thought, well, no, we got paying customers, all 4 of them.
I mean, the Chance, as you know, it's legendary. It's been here since 1970. Originally, it was called Frivolous Sal's Last Chance Saloon. Larry Plover is the guy who owned it back then. He ran the place up until the mid-'70s, late '70s. That's when the Police, of course, played their first U.S. date here, which is a Trivia Pursuit question, which is really cool.
Tell us about that.
Obviously, I wasn't here. I was 7 years old when it took place, but it's one of those stories that so many people claim to be here, but actual attendance, I think there was about 14 people here. So many people at WPDH, they talk about it, and a couple of guys, I think Stan Feinstein was one guy that was here. but the police, against their record company's recommendation, they wanted to tour. And it was before Roxanne came out, the single hit. So very few people knew who they were. And they came in, they played, and literally a couple months later, Roxanne's a hit.
At that time, there was a very friendly radio station here called WPDH that was very friendly with the local bands and were connected with the Chants. Stan Beinstein, our good friend, was a large part of that station. There was a DJ there who was a great guy who helped all the local bands out by the name of Ron Nenny.
Yep.
Good guy.
Yep.
So Ron said to me that night, why don't you come to the station, and because we must have been playing a show, we'll hawk your show
Maybe
on the
the
radio
Chants,
station.
yeah.
You come and hang with me, and then we'll go over to the Chants to see this new band in England that's supposed to be good.
Ask you, what are your memories of playing with the Police at the Last Chance in Poughkeepsie, October 20th, 1978?
I can remember the football game, but not who won it. And of the 40 people who were there, I've met all 500 of them.
Any memories of the venue? From what I hear, it was a snowy night.
It was a snowy, blizzardy night.
The reason I remember it was snowy because I remember debating whether I wanted to get to the radio station. And I finally got there. It was a pretty icy, snowy night. And we hung out with Ron. And his shift was a later shift. I think maybe we ended at 10. Music was going on later in those days. And Ron didn't want to go to the Chants by himself. So I said, okay, Ron, we'll do the radio show. Marie was with me.
I went, yeah.
We'll hang
I
out.
remember
And
it like
then
it
at
was
the end of
yesterday.
your show, we'll all drive over to the Chants. I might have driven him because of the
It's
ice.
close by.
It's close by. We went over there, and we show up, and the guys, the police are playing. We didn't know. It was part of it was a little bit after the punk world. It was when the punk world started becoming into a better music world.
Right.
And we knew they were from England.
They had a van outside.
They had the
were
van
gonna travel in
outside.
their van and go to some gigs.
Oh, yeah, they were
came in
driving
a
the van themselves. I don't
Yep.
even know if they had a road crew.
No.
I remember there being a Super Bowl on.
I think Monday Night Football, maybe.
Perhaps. There was some really, really important game, and which is why there was only 4 people in the room. And it was our good fortune that those 4 people were radio guys.
3 people paid. Three. Some say 6, 4. Yeah, right. But the It's usual not- 7 or Wait 8 a minute. hangers on. Wait, let me get one thing straight here. We paid for it, Chris and I. I know.
You guys produced
We
that show.
paid, so I know exactly. We grossed $15.
What did it cost you to produce that show?
$250 for the band, and we made $15. 3 people paid.
That's possible. Yeah, we didn't pay to get in. Well, we were Ron Nenny, so I didn't have to pay to get in.
You took a hit.
3 people paid. There were 3 people on the guest list.
We walked in, and there's a good friend of ours, Joe Lamorello, bass player that had played with us in the 60s and 70s in the city and up here. I think I know Stan was there. And they all came running over to us. You got to hear this band. It's a fantastic show. And we caught the tail end.
We caught about 4 or 5 songs.
Yeah, 4 or 5 songs, but I think they'd started earlier.
Yeah, we were having a drink at the bar, and we were watching them. And they were performing on the stage like they were in a stadium. Where they were preparing themselves.
You were not there that night, even though you booked it, although the late Larry Plover, bless his soul, says he had something to do with it.
He had nothing to
Well,
do with it.
he went
I'm
over
telling
there.
you, he had
He
nothing
owned
to
the
do.
joint.
It
He had
pissed
something
me
to-
off that I have to hear this shit after 40 years. They sent me, XTC sent me the police 45 of this song. I put the thing on, it goes, Roxanne! I called Chris up, and we had done the Ramones. We were doing these other crazy new bands. I said, this sounds good. We're going to do this, guys.
Were you making money with the
The
Ramones?
Ramones were cool. I'll tell you exactly why the Ramones were cool.
Okay.
After they did one show, everybody else, they wanted a set amount of money. The Ramones said, we believe that we will get a following. Therefore, we will work with you guys as a percentage of the gate so that they got 25, 30% of whatever they, and sure enough, we did, what did we do? Almost 5 shows with those guys. By show 2 or 3, they were getting people in for that Blitzkrieg bop shit. And, I want to be sedated and all that crap.
The Ramones, is another band that this was like, a regular stop for them. In fact, one of their records, the back of the record is taken at the box office. Yeah.
That's great.
So so the history of the Chance is you could go on, and it was built in 1912 originally as a movie theater. It was called the Duchess Theater, and then it was a vaudeville theater, and then just an orchestra theater, and then it was closed for a long period of time until Larry Plover, who I mentioned before, they took over the place and opened it back up in 1970. But as you see it today, the balcony was completely condemned. From what I was told, there was a ladder going up just for the lighting guy up there. Okay, but you couldn't, it wasn't open to the public here. It wasn't until Pete Francis, who bought it at an auction in the late 70s, he was an antique dealer, and he completely restored the Chance. Art Deco ceiling, you can see the stained glass and so on and so forth. He redid the balcony, so he put a lot of money back into it to restore it. Not to originally a movie theater, but a concert venue, and that's pretty much how it sits today.
I'm pretty sure that we were, the band that I had with John Reagan, John Skinny Reagan, was the first rock band there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with Larry Plover. Before that, it was, whatever the Chance was,
They had like
Dixieland,
yeah.
that kind of thing. And so literally we opened up that whole scene.
It was a kind of a rainy evening, and I was sitting home. The phone rang, and it was Mike Curiati from the Chance. He said, "Chris, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm watching TV." He said, "You got to get over here." I said, "Wow, what's up?" He said, "Sam and Dave are going on. The place is full. The people are pounding on the floor, and the drummer disappeared."
He was in D.C. The drummer was in D.C.
The town they worked in the last night.
They left him in Washington.
And not only that, he took the drums too. And I said, "What?" He said, "Get over here." So I ran over there. Didn't have a drum set, because there was a drum set on stage that the Dixie band used. A horrible drum set. I go over there with a V-neck sweater, khakis, penny loafers, and there's Sam and Dave and the band in red sparkle
Flash Gordon
jumpsuits.
outfit. They look like Flash Gordon.
And I see Paul.
No,
and
listen, man.
And I say, "Paul, we're going to start off with what's the tune?"
No, he goes like this. Let me just jump in here for a second. First of all, you can't get into the place. It's packed. I mean, it's so crowded. So Michael sees me and he goes like this. I'm tending bar. He goes, "Come here." He says, "You want to play with these guys tonight? They need a drummer." Took me 2 seconds to say no. I went just like this. I went, "No way. No, there's no way." He gets him, right? He comes in, like he says, he's dressed like he just got out of the varsity club, right? It's unbelievable, right?
I'm standing backstage.
Yeah.
I'm
Listen, he's watching.
I'm
Now listen.
this
No,
lesson,
yeah.
the
But on the way up,
Then he gives the jazz drum.
he goes like this to me. He sees me behind the bar. And he goes like this. He's on his way up. He's trying to squeeze me behind all the people. The place is packed. He's going up. He goes, "Come here, come here." I said, "What?" He goes, How's that song go? That hit they had. Oh, Soul Man? How's that go? He says to me, "How's it go?" He goes, and I go like this. Play quarter notes on the bell of the cymbal. Ding, ding, and he did it. And
the drum set, the first time I hit the cymbal, it just fell right off.
The cymbal fell off the stage.
Did it really?
I swear.
Yeah, it was that kind of drum
With
set.
the audience in mind.
No, the curtain went up and we were hysterical.
In the middle of the song, drummer shows up. Drummer shows up, doesn't wait for the song to end, walks out and looks down at him.
Well, actually, I did about 2 or 3 tunes with him.
No, but the way he passed the baton, Chris didn't stop playing. He did this, and the other guy sat down like that.
The wind-up is the show. The drummer did show up, and he pushed me aside and sat down and finished the show. Right after the show, they all went to the bar. Sam here, Dave here, and they were. It was like 2 different bands.
Yes.
They were enemies.
Really?
The hits that they had, the only reason they went out to make money.
During that time period, we were also trying to do shows at what Paul had mentioned, the Joyous Lake.
Right.
And the one show that we did for 2 nights were the Talking Heads.
The late Ron Marions owned that club. an abrasive Jew from Brooklyn. I know because I am one.
You're not abrasive, Stan.
Not at all.
right.
Now, the talking heads are unknown. And the thing to understand about this era, you look back on this police state and you figure, my God, you must have known their greatness in the moment that they arrived on stage. You don't realize what you're looking at.
No, that's the whole point. I did. It was like instant charisma with this guy, David Byrne. I was sitting in awe, and Chris was not.
You were in awe, but your checkbook was in awe.
No, the checkbook. This was the deal: $275 a night. Each Ron to pay half, and we're paying half. Two nights. We had to book them for 2 nights.
It was a rainy night.
$550.
It was a rainy night.
All right, so listen to this, Ron. To show you, as Stan has indicated, how crazy he was. That is the personification of club owners. All they give a shit about is whether they're going to make money and not make money. They really don't care.
The same reason you decide how many pizzas to make for lunch. You make too many pizzas, you're going to throw them out.
So Ron comes over to me, and I've been waiting all these years to meet David Byrne to say this line. Ron comes over to me and he gets about 2 feet from my nose.
How many people in a joint?
And probably about 8, 10, a little more than the police.
Rivals the police state, it does.
Yeah, big crowd.
And he looks me in the face and he goes the classic line. Eric, I don't give a shit if their fucking heads talk. Get them the fuck out of my place. And I go, sorry, Ron, we got a 2-night contract.
Now, you got to understand what Ron was used to booking, because being in Woodstock, the members of the band, Paul Butterfield, Taj Mahal, Bonnie Raitt, all these people would hang in this tiny little joint. The place was really of a certain class.
Yeah.
Now Eric has cited that he booked Talking Heads, lost money. The Police lost money. Peter Gabriel at the Civic Center lost money. So I like to say that my dear friend Eric has the Midas touch.
Well,
everything he touches turns to mufflers.
I went to the Gabriel Sting tour last year at Jones Beach and in and in Brooklyn, and I wanted to talk to Sting, but I couldn't get to talk to him. But every time I see him, he was up in the Connecticut at one of the casinos. He brings me over to his road manager. Gabriel, he did this 3 times with me. He says, he thinks I'm the only promoter. Chris was the partner and 2 other guys. He goes, hey, you gotta meet the guy that did the Police, the Talking Heads, and me in like a 3-month period and lost all the money. And they all stand around laughing at me like I'm an asshole.
I've been working so hard off the same album. I've been working so hard. Well, the way I got to the Van Morrison thing was through a band I was gigging with locally, and my girlfriend at the time said, Van Morrison's moved up here, and he's looking for a guitar player. I said, I'm not really interested. This is
before Moondance.
Yeah, before Moondance. He was up in Boston, and he came up, he moved into to Woodstock. After he left Bang Records, he had 1 album, which was Astral Weeks. Never sold a thing. You know, it was just a cult favorite. But after that, you know, Van was broke. But he moved to Woodstock, and he was setting up auditions for musicians. And so my girlfriend at the time kept coming up to me, said, you know, you got to audition for Van. I said, I'm not really interested. And so she brought Van's tour manager at the time, Tom Reynolds, who I'm still friends with, a Brit. And so they set up an audition. I relented and set up the audition up on a place called Ohio Mountain Road, up on Woodstock, overlooking the Shokan Reservoir. It's actually quite beautiful. So I auditioned for about 2 or 3 songs, and that was it. The band took my number, and we started gigging up there, and had no, you know, we rehearsed maybe not even a year. I didn't know where he was going with it. But to me, it was gigs.
It was a session.
And he was broke. I mean, you know, sometimes we didn't get paid. Wow. I always said, Van, did any checks come in from your management? I mean, he goes, not yet. You know, in those days, who cared? Make me feel feels so good.
The man that I literally owe my entire professional career to is Crazy Joe Renda, who I met through John Platania when we worked on a Chip Taylor record called Gasoline. Chip Taylor's John Voight's brother.
Okay.
And Chip was a Westchesterite that wrote country songs. Well, Chip wrote Angel of the Morning, he wrote Wild Thing, and he wrote all kinds of hits for big country stars. A lot of Waylon Jennings. Yeah. So that was my first record I played on was a country record, Chip Taylor. But then Joe ended up opening a studio in White Plains called North Lake Sound with Chip, John Voight, and 2 other partners. And when I heard he had a studio, I said, Joe, I'm willing to drive down for any sessions. So I'd go down to Joe's and we would record once a week. It was like a card game. We would record really the most ridiculous thing we could think of, which ended up being the Crazy Joe and the Variable Speed band. We got to deal with Casablanca Records completely out of nowhere.
Amazing.
But in doing that, I got to become very good friends with Joe, played on a lot of sessions, and Bobby Mayo, the late Bobby Mayo, who was Peter Frampton's right-hand man. The Frampton Comes Alive album, and for years after that, was maybe a mile away from the studio. So one night he came over and they needed a bass player like in 4 days because they were finishing up a tour, going out on the last leg, and the bass player was not working out. So I get a call from Joe Renda at like 10 o'clock at night. He goes, hey, I got a gig for you. You want to play with Peter Frampton? I said, get out of here. Because at that time, Peter was the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah, you're
you know?
right.
And I was like, I said, what do you want? He goes, no, you need to come down here, and if you're interested, I played some of the tracks for Bobby Mayo, and he said, come on down and let's talk about it. So I got my car, drove to White Plains. Mayo handed me a stack of records.
Really?
2 hours worth of, the set list.
Sure.
Which is pretty much all of Frampton Comes Alive, plus some new stuff. So I met Bobby, and it was Tuesday night. Now it's almost probably midnight, and he goes, you got to be ready on Friday. I said, which Friday? He goes,
this Friday.
A couple days from now. I said, okay. Opportunity doesn't knock like this all the time.
You're
so
exactly
I drove home. I had my wife put on a pot of coffee, and I stayed up for 2 days straight learning.
Did you really?
2 hours of music that I'd never played.
Wow.
And I figured, okay, I'm going to get like a rehearsal or something.
No.
Didn't happen.
Wow.
We got out of the car, onto the stage.
Where was that first gig with him?
I think, I want to say Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. I just kind of remember going like this.
Yeah.
Making the sign of the cross. And I remember during the course of that first show, occasionally Peter would turn around and kind of smile, and I figured, all right, I'm not fired yet, And that ended up being a 31-year musical and personal friendship.
Are we ready? That was me. Sugar.
So many years ago, 30 some odd years ago, I was introduced to a gentleman, my sister-in-law's cousin. His name is Tony DeVillio. Tony grew up in Newburgh. His dad was a record producer locally, and Tony ended up playing guitar. And early on, his early to mid-20s, he ended up producing a song for a group called the Five Stair Steps that was called Ooh Child. And we all know that. It became a huge hit, and that was like, right out of the box. He had an enormous hit, and we thought he was all destined to be, giant star. But the music business has other ideas for all of us. So he struggled for years and years, and went on to study with a guy named Dennis Sandoli, who was actually a teacher for John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner. And Tony was always really good to me, tried to get me some gigs, and We used to have a little duo thing where he played the Chapman stick, which is all this tapping stuff, and I played my 7-string. And one day Tony called me and said, "Hey, I got this great gig. I'm arranging and playing rhythm guitar on some music for John and Yoko." And that became the Double Fantasy record, so we thought, wow, Tony's really hit the big time. And just as it was about to come out 35 years ago, we all know what happened. So we were here for sound check this afternoon, and I went home and checked my Facebook page and found out that Tony passed away this afternoon. He's been struggling for a long time with cancer. So I want to dedicate this song to him. This is one of my compositions. It's called All Fly Home.
Tony was my greatest influence in my career ever, and I'll explain why. He dropped out of high school in 10th grade and said, "I know what I'm going to do, I know what I'm going to do, I'm just not sure how I'm going to get there, but school is not for me now." And I thought that was really courageous and almost like I didn't have the guts to do that. So he quit school and he moved to New York and became a session player. And he met a guy named Stan Vincent, who I also ended up working with. But Tony became a very successful musician, playing in sessions, and then of course he got to meet John Lennon and work with John Lennon, where he won a Grammy. He won a Grammy Award for arranging parts of Double Fantasy. So we locked up with Tony again. After he worked with John Lennon, his mother still lived in Newburgh, and I said, would you produce me? He said, "Well, right now I can't, but in about 6 months I can." Tony sat me down. We were in his room, and he said, "Okay, show me your originals." And I said, "Well, I have a limited knowledge of the keyboard because it's a percussive instrument, being a drummer, and I write my songs on piano." And I started playing these simple little chord things, because that's all I knew was simple chords. And I was playing these songs, and he started talking. He goes, "Oh, I like this one, I like that one." So I stopped him, and I said, "Tony, so is this how it's done?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm sitting here with these simple little chords and songs." He goes, "Let me tell you a story, Gary. I worked with John Lennon. You know what John Lennon did? He took me into a room in the studio. He sat at the piano, and for the Double Fantasy album, he showed me the little simple chord structures to his songs in Double Fantasy. And I sat right next to him, just like I'm doing with you, and we started to think about arrangements and parts and horns and things, just like you. That broke the ice for me and gave me such confidence that this guy, who's worked with some of the biggest names in the world, is telling me it's okay what I'm doing. It was a tremendous weight off of my shoulders.
There's certain musicians that are revered by musicians. One of which is Steve Morse. Early 90s, he was touring as a trio, and they were going to play at the Chance. And at the same time that their gig at the Chance was being announced, I happened to go to the Chance. Their gig was going to be in June, and late April, I went there to see the guitar trio. So I went to the show, and Ken, I'm spacing out Ken's last name, but Ken was the manager at the time, and said to me, "I'm going to go up and announce the trio. Steve Morse is going to be here in June. I want you to open for him."
Great.
And I said, "It's an honor." I'd played the Chance many times with a lot of different people and done shows with Dion and Southside Johnny and different people of that genre. But I said, "Ken, I don't have a band. I can't do that." He goes, "I'm going to announce it, and you're going to put something together." And I said, I don't have anything to put together. And he walked up on stage and started announcing people, and he said, on June, whatever it was, 20-something, Steve Morse is going to be here, and Tony DePaolo is going to open for him. So
put you in a position.
Put me in a position where, and that is something I've discovered, and this is a huge bit of advice I'll give to anybody that wants to perform and is not performing. You need to have a gig first. Like, everyone sits in a garage or in a basement and works on music, and they're there working on it for years. But if you have a gig, you have no choice but to get yourself together, get organized, and put together a show, which is what I did.
Years ago, when I started playing out, gigs, he got me like my first gig. He says, "Hey man, you want a gig?" He says, "You got to go audition at the Rocking Horse Ranch." At this time, I really wasn't playing drums, but he was like, he's like my big brother, man.
Yeah,
So he
big
calls me
brother,
up. He says, "I said, yeah, what do I got to do?" He says, "Just go over there and audition, man. You got the good hands. You'll get it." So I go over there and audition. I think it was Mac Williams and somebody else, and they start playing, "Fly Me to the Moon."
Yeah.
It's a show stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I'm able to play the jazz thing, right? The guy turns around. He says, "You got the gig, man. Here tomorrow night." I said, yeah, okay, cool. I walk out and I say to myself, "I don't have any drums." I'm saying, holy, I took the gig, I got no drums. So I call him up. We pieced together a drum set. It looked like it was unbelievable, different colors. So, but now I'm at the gig, and this guy says, "Now I know we're going to play a rumba, the next set."
He calls me from a payphone.
I'm calling him.
He's going, how do you do a rumba? So I'm tapping.
He's singing it over the phone. We told Steve Gadd the story. He's going like this to me. He's going like this. And I'm going like this. Oh, I got you, man. We told Steve Gadd the story. He was hysterical. He would sing the rhythms. "Hey, man, I gotta play a waltz. Give me it again." I'm telling you, man. He would sing them over the. I had the gig. They loved me, man.
But I walked into a situation where, the chance was sold out, and it was Steve Morse, who's world-renowned guitarist. I mean, and he had done the same thing. He had opened for John McLaughlin, who is, probably one of the greatest guitarists in the history of guitar playing. Same thing for him. But now I was doing it with Steve Morse and, with all of my peers, that were in the audience, all guitar players and guitar fans and that sort of thing. And we just did all original music that I had written that I'd never performed live before. And it was a resounding success, and I got asked back to do it again, and we did it with Stanley Jordan and different people like that. I know you're right now. I know your dreams. I feel everything you want, baby. Oh, the cult of personality.
This place hosted a great deal of influential music that sort of burgeoned my whole career. That there are places in and around this area, in and around the Hudson Valley, that a bunch of really sort of like the precursors to rock and roll. Sort of came through here.
Yes.
And came through towns like this. I'm sure we've all heard the history of Newburgh and how it's and the things how influential it is. Before Hendrix went to Woodstock, he came here.
That's right.
And after Woodstock, he came here. He didn't hang out in Woodstock or what was then Bethel Woods or wherever it was that it was going on. He came here because it was cooler to be here.
He played at a place called the Trade Winds,
Right.
when nobody knew who he was.
The Trade Winds was known for having very good bands. That place then, after a few years, the owners, to enlarge it, and they tore it down and built a bigger place.
Mm-hmm.
When that happened, they had Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Fats Domino and his band played there. They were huge. The other person that, and this is interesting, Tom Jones, in order to get I believe a green card to come over to the United States and play, had to have a job waiting for him. And his first job was at the Trade Winds.
Really?
And the owner had showed me the papers that he had received that he had to sign in order to prove that he did have a job there.
The two biggest clubs in total volume in the region were owned by two brothers. Frank Peterzak owned the Trade Winds in Newburgh, and Tony Peterzak owned the Buccaneer in Poughkeepsie. we loved playing at both of them, and we had a grand old time. It was just a great setup.
They were both great people, very friendly people, and I got to know Frank and his wife very well. They took real good care of me when I was out there, me and a few other people, and everybody that knew Frank loved him. He was just that great a guy.
When I came up, there was no question that I could make a living playing the guitar and playing in clubs, because there were so many. There were 50 some odd clubs or more if you went up the Hudson River, Hudson Valley from Westchester to, Kingston or Albany. But even just in the mid Hudson Valley, in the Beacon, Newburgh, Wappingers, you could drive up Route 9 on the other side of the river, Dutchess County, and there were just innumerable clubs, and there were guys that had been doing it for years. There were new bands that were coming up. It was happening every night of the week. There were hotels like the Holiday Inn and places like that that had music all the time. So there was no way that you could see this ever changing.
Back then you could support a family playing 4 nights a week, and there were plenty of places to play 4 nights a week.
The Richie Furay Band with special guest star Andy Pratt in concert tonight at the Bardavon Theater, Poughkeepsie for one show only. Friday, October 15th, that's tonight, at 8 o'clock for one show only. There are not 2 shows. For further information, you can call this number 454-6070. That's 454-6070. The Richie Furay Band with special guest star Andy Pratt.
The first band I ever played in was the Furies. And it was 1962. We played at the Moose Lodge in downtown Newburgh. It was Doug Shook on lead guitar, me on rhythm guitar, and Dennis Shook on drums. Eventually the Furies added a bass player, Bob Richardson, and then we switched drummers to a guy named Cyril De Lorenzo. And we played in places like the Mayflower on Washington Street in Newburgh. Everybody's played there, but not too many admit it, because it was the toughest club in the city. And but we lasted out. We did pretty good, and we enjoyed the Mayflower.
It had a bad reputation, but we played there quite a bit, and I saw maybe one little shuffle the whole time we played there. The owner was very nice, Dixie Maraday, and he had, it was one of the few bars back there that had a stage, at least where we played, that had a stage and a backdrop of curtains and everything, and lights. So it was pretty neat.
But little by little, you could see things change. The first thing was, obviously everybody's out drinking in clubs. There were issues with DWI. That kind of helped to shrink some of the situations, because now not as many people were going out. And then I think the nail in the coffin of all that stuff was the drinking age going to 21. So you cut out, half of your audience could no longer come out and actually see it and support it. I think the biggest change for me is that when we were coming up playing, we always got a guaranteed amount of money. And some bands were a little bit less, some bands were a little bit more. But it was a guaranteed amount. And you could count on that. At the end of the week, we'd play 3 nights or 2 nights or 5 nights or whatever it was, and we knew what we were getting per night, and we would get a paycheck at the end of the week. And now, living in Beacon and watching Beacon explode into the artist community that it is, with multiple art galleries and restaurant, bars, music venues. There's several places to perform. There's just a dozen or more that have music on a regular basis, but for the most part, there's no guarantee of money. Right. And the very first time I played at one of my favorite venues in Beacon, Quinn's, I had to come to grips with, they're going to have a box, and people were going to put money in this box. And the Falcon in Newburgh the same, or in Marlboro the same way. And I was amazed at people that were coming to play at the Falcon, that you bring up the Falcon. Name acts, a guitarist I know from the city, Osnoy, who's world-renowned, tours all over the world, amazing guitarist. And, he would come to play at the Falcon, and I'd say, how do you do it? How do you come up from the city? But he was playing with Will Lee, who was in the David Letterman band, and Anton Fig, who was in the David Letterman band. So there were a couple of name guys, and there's a little bit larger draw. And, they're making decent money.
I have world-class artists that perform here that would never play for a donation box, but they will for the Falcon because they support what we're doing here. This is really all about the music and the art.
Right.
They know I'm not making any money off of their performance. Food and drink is the only way I make money. Our mission is support living artists, and it's not just me that's saying that. I want everyone to be part of that. You know, I always tell people at each show to buy original artwork and to support all the venues throughout the Hudson Valley. I mention that every show. On my website, I list all of the venues. I list the Town Crier and the Bearsville Theater and Daryl's House, and I tell people to support them all.
Right.
It's all part of development of this Hudson Valley sound, which is so important that we continue it and continue to make the Hudson Valley one of the greatest places in the world.
This is the underground. Can you show us around?
Sure. This is a rock and roll museum called the Avalon Archives, and it's a collection that my friend Ned Moran has been collecting all his life, and he needed a place. When I was just finishing this room, he serendipitously had to move out of the location he was in Brewster, New York, and he asked if he could move the collection here. So I have this amazing memorabilia collection of rock and roll.
I started as a teenager collecting 78 records with the harp tones and people like that. And I sang in doo-wop groups when I was in high school. And then when I got into college, I got into Bob Dylan about 1961 or 62. But what made me start to hold on to things were the posters that came out of San Francisco.
Haight-Ashbury.
Haight-Ashbury days, and we would get these off of telephone poles and storefronts, Chinese laundromats, you know, just around the streets. And today they're worth hundreds and thousands of dollars in some cases.
Yeah.
But what you see on the walls here is our history. Okay, the guitars over here, some of these are gifts from different people. This one is signed by ZZ Top. This Danelectro bass played behind Tim Hardin up in Woodstock back in the 60s. This acoustic guitar was played by Jorma Kaukonen, and also Jorma's mentor, Ian Buchanan, which is kind of pretty cool. And the last one is signed by the original Van Halen members. This is Rick Danko's amplifier. This was on the stage in the film The Last Waltz, the famous rock film about the band.
In 1985, I was starting to become a pretty well-known engineer and session player, and Artie Traum from Happy and Artie Traum called me to do a Livingston Taylor recording session. Right at that time, the band, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame group, the band, called Artie and they wanted to regroup. They had done The Last Waltz in '76. They all had solo careers for a while and decided they wanted to regroup, and they asked Garth, who would be a good guy, to help put that together in the studio, live shows, and do some production work. And luckily for me, Artie Traum recommended me. So once that happened, a lot of opportunities opened up for me. The band couldn't get a record deal without Robbie Robertson, who had left. And so we worked really hard for about 8 or 9 years and finally landed a record deal. And I was fortunate enough to produce probably 150 to 200 songs with those guys, more than anybody in history. And put 3 albums out with them, and was part of that organization for about 16, 17 years. Levon, of course, was the spearhead and the hitmaker of the band. His voice was the hitmaker. The other guys were tremendous singers and had great talents. But with Lee, he was always the forerunner, one of the bigger spokesmen. It was actually his band originally with it when it was the Hawks, Levon Helm and the Hawks. So he was always the spokesman. And I had never met a more talented person. I could go in and record a song. I don't know if he had a photographic memory or how it worked, but he would be able to memorize scripts and songs right on the spot. And we did a TV show. We did 75 episodes of a television show called The Road out of Nashville. And Levon was the host. It was a great show. And he would have to do at least 10, maybe 3-4 scripts a week. And we would go in and record them, and he'd have them down, and I know it was the first time he read them. Just like when we recorded the comeback hit that we recorded called Atlantic City. And we did that in one night in basically 1 or 2 takes. Lee had it down, never sang the song before, and played drums. He always played drums and sang. We never did the vocals separate from the drumming. He was a great guy to work with. He was a good boss, and I always respected a lot. And I would be his roommate in a lot of hotels because he didn't like staying in hotels by himself. And the one thing that was good, when we'd stay in the higher end hotels when the money was there, he would order everything on the takeout menu, on room service, to see what was good on the menu.
Unbelievable.
And there'd be lines of trays outside. And he was a skinny guy. He hardly ate.
Oh, he tasted everything. That was it.
And so therefore all the roadies and all the
Right.
crew would be hanging in the room. So that was a good part of it, though. So there was a lot of camaraderie when we were on the road, especially when things were going great and there were 2 buses and a crew bus and all that stuff that happens. There was a lot of camaraderie, and a lot of that was because of Levon, because he treated everybody on the road, with respect.
My name is Neil Howard. I'm from San Francisco, California, originally. First generation, parents are from Ireland and Australia, so we're like a little satellite family in California, or we were. And then my wife and I moved to New York about, 12 years ago. Ended up having a little summer cabin in Woodstock and started living here real fast, is what happens apparently.
Yeah, right.
And then we came to this place all the time because it was a beautiful room and it was rarely open, but when we saw that it was open, we pretty much turned the car around and went. And always came in and said it would be incredible if somebody sort of loved it up a bit. And
Sure.
here we are, not knowing, we're not club owners. It was just sort of a kind of a life adventure fluke thing where, it was for sale one day.
And what was it when you came here?
It was a music venue, but used, very sparingly. I half worried and wondered if there would be some sort of natural resentment, kind of like, what are you going to do to our colony? That's our colony,
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was like pretty much that, but the opposite. It's like when
How can
you
we
have
help you?
made the colony what I've always wanted it to be. It's like I've had 17-year-olds and 83-year-olds come up to me and say, I've walked by that building my entire life. Like the 83-year-old
Is
says
that
he's
right?
walked by it his entire life, as of course the kid has. But they've always looked in the window and wondered why wasn't it open, or why
Right.
wasn't it sort of more vital? And so in that sense, we're kind of lucky because there isn't that sort of heyday. Like the Joyous Lake has this incredible reputation. And let's say we had reopened that. There would always be that person saying when Joe ran this place, it was off the hook, it was crazy, and I'm like, so this place doesn't really have a Joe era or a peak. It was like, it opened right before the stock market crash. It was actually a way station hotel before the Overlook Mountain Hotel. There was the same owner, and it's hard to picture now because everything is kind of built up. But apparently, even as late as the 29, 30, there was no paved roads around here, even though it was like paved roads were common and cars were common.
Right.
Here, it was still horses and buggies and stuff coming from the ferry.
Right.
So they would take the boat and then take a horse and cart and buggy and stuff here, and then stay for one night here in small but nice appointed rooms and a little band and banquet.
There's
and,
something to eat.
Yeah, it was probably very typical in those days, but to me it sounds incredibly like a Cary Grant movie. A tiny little ballroom on the side of the road.
You're right.
And they probably had a little tuxedo just tucked away in their bag, and then they would go up another half day for the next day for the Overlook.
Woodstock, the way they attracted, the number of people they attracted, from New York, who moved out of New York to go up there. In the summer, loads and loads of musicians traveled from New York in the summer, and they came up there. It was the respite out of the city, and they came up and they lived up there, and they made an okay salary and played shows. Anybody from Jackie Mason, Lola Falana, Robert Goulet, all that group. So I played there, and then I moved to New York in '75, and I started playing in New York, and I did some recording, and I did some traveling, and but in '84, I kind of became disillusioned with the scene for me, because it was hard. I wanted to get married. I did get married in '83, and I wanted to have some kids, and I didn't want to bring the kids up in the city at the time. The city's not what it is. It wasn't then what it is now. It's a lot cleaner place, even though I love the grittiness of the city back in '84. But the city has changed. So in '84, a good friend of mine who worked with Woody Allen, he was a production manager with Woody Allen, he and I had been talking because he lived in a loft right across the hall from me. And I inquired and pressured him many times to see if I get into the film business, because I used to love the film business, and I'd practice at night, but during the day it was hot in my loft. I had a loft and couldn't afford air conditioning, so I used to go see the double features down at Cinema Village or the Quad or Theater 80 or St. Mark's Place, and they'd have double features, and I'd go in like at 1 and get done at 6, and I'd watch all the retrospectives back then, whether it was Bergman or Hitchcock or whoever, and the hottest part of the day, I wouldn't have to. I'd cool down and then come back. But I always had a love for film. So anyway, in 1984, I was given my shot to get into film, and I started on a movie called Desperately Seeking Susan. And so I did that, and I remember going to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was culture shock to me. It really was. I had never experienced anything like that. And I remember going to work to get the campers all in and get ready for the hair and makeup and everything, because I was in the location department. And we shot on the Lower East Side, and I remember going to work and seeing guys coming from the clubs, either from the Tin Palace or from the Gate or Alley's Alley or clubs on the East Village, walking home. And it was two different worlds passing. And I almost didn't even want to see them, because it was like I had given up on the music, and I felt embarrassed about that. So I got into it in '84, and I started as a location scout, and then I became a assistant location manager, and then I became a location manager on Big, the movie Big, and then I did Working Girl, and then from location manager I became a production manager. My first jobs as production manager were The Last Action Hero and Donnie Brasco, and I did many movies as a production manager. And then in the 2000s I became a production manager, and that's what I do now. And I just finished right here at Kaufman Astoria Studios. Just finished doing the second Scorsese picture that I did. I did Wolf of Wall Street, and we just completed The Irishman. We like to think we do what we love, although there are times when we have to do things that we don't necessarily love, but we had a necessity. But obviously, you're still playing music. Yes. And I'm playing music all over again. So I started, a year and 6 months ago, in the end of 2016, the end of 2016, December of 16, I started playing music again after 33 years of being away, hiatus again. I said, I just finished doing Spider-Man, The Homecoming, the 6th one. I've done 5 of the 6 Spider-Men. And when I got done, I said, what the hell am I doing? I mean, what's going on here? I'm an old man, and I got to get back to music. I've never stopped listening to it. I would play maybe 1 gig a year, possibly. So I just woodshedded for about 5-6 weeks. I was practicing 4 or 5 hours a day, and I was fortunate enough to have a club that was looking for some services, and I played like 30 gigs last year with some great musicians, and continuing to do it now, and I'm kind of balancing the two, although I'd like to phase out the film now and get back into the music, because I've done film for 34 years. So anyway, it's pretty full. But like I was saying, we try to, when you're an artist and when you have a passion for doing that, it doesn't leave you.
It's strange. Most people have jobs they can't wait to leave and come home. Yeah. Musician, if you're a true musician, you just want to play.
You love it, yeah.
And it's not even about the money part. A lot of young musicians will, a lot of times come up and ask for advice, but the conversation inevitably gets around to, oh, it must be great to play in front of, tens of thousands of people, and get paid, good money to do it.
Right.
And I tell them, those 2 hours, that's not what I'm paid for.
No.
That's the joyous part.
That's
I'm
correct.
paid for the 22 hours that I'm not with my family.
Right.
I'm sleeping in a hotel somewhere.
Right.
But the playing part, that's the payoff.
You're exactly right. You're
And
right.
I tell them, I said, I said, and don't get into music because you think you're going to become this star or something.
No.
So the only reason to play music is that you can't not play music.
Right. Right.
If that's not your modus operandi, maybe you better think about doing something else.
Yeah, what's funny? I had a guy in the blues band who always used to say, I'm selling out for playing other people's music. In the blues band, we did primarily, original stuff that me and this particular guy co-wrote. And I just never really looked at it that way. I mean, to me, it's like if you have a store and you have product on your shelves, what do you want to happen to the product? I want to sell it. It's not a museum. And I feel like I can listen to whatever I want on the way home. I can play whatever I want whenever I want. Somebody is paying me, and at this point, I've been supporting my family for years at my chosen craft. I don't care what I play. I'm very thankful I'm able to do it. They're like two parallel universes. The songs that I learn to make my band viable and, float the boat versus the songs I listen to. I don't need them to be in the same place.
If you're going to present your own music, you should throw in a few cover songs so people tie into it. Just don't do your own music. I think that's really important. Because even the greatest of writers, like Bob Dylan, always did cover blues songs and folk songs in his shows. He didn't just only do his own stuff. And you can't get much better writing. No. Matter of fact, his first record was all cover songs.
When we first met Bruce Springsteen, we were kids on the Jersey Shore. Bruce was just doing all R&B cover.
Oh, yeah.
And we were doing all original stuff. And one of my most famous memories is we played an original concert in like a church hall or something. Bruce and his band were sitting there. We were all hanging out together. We were kids. And he came up to Louis and he said, gee, I think I'm going to start writing some songs. You guys are writing some. I think I'll go start writing some songs.
Yeah, that's why it was funny.
And as years went by, I never forgot that because I thought, wow, look what happened.
Well, that's why it was funny. My biggest opportunity ever in history was to produce Atlantic City, that he wrote.
That was like
I thought it was really funny.
Came
that
full
it
circle.
came full circle. Like
yeah.
that.
When I was 20, this KISS tribute act out of Staten Island called Kissology called me up for an audition. And I remember I went down to the city, we auditioned for 2 hours, I got the gig. It was awesome, I was playing these venues I'd never played before. Then from there, Kiss Alive NYC, which was this big famous tribute band in the Bronx, New York City, needed a sit-in drummer. So they called me, I said okay, I went down to play, and they looked at me. We rehearsed once, and they said, "You're the guy. You're not gonna sit in. You're gonna be the full-time drummer." And it took off from there. I traveled the country, all over. I learned a lot about the business, a lot about music in general, and how you put on a stage show.
Nile Rodgers is my favorite producer I've ever worked with. Gave me a call through Rob Sabino, who was his keyboard player, who played on all of the Bowie Let's Dance record, Madonna, Duran Duran. Bobby was his guy. And he was also someone else I knew from North Lake Sound and White Plains. So he had recommended me to Nile. They were cutting, all I know is it was a benefit, so there was no money involved. But I figured, okay, it's Nile Rodgers. I should pay him.
Right, yeah, exactly right, right.
And it ended up being, they had a bass part on a track called Dancing in the Streets that was being done by Mick Jagger and David Bowie for Live Aid. They didn't like the bass part for whatever reason, so they asked me to come in and replace it.
Wow.
So of course I
Absolutely.
got there, an hour early.
Early, right.
And introduced to Nile. And when I replace bass parts, I like doing it in the control room with the speakers up, like it's a live thing.
Yes.
I'm not an earphone guy.
Yes.
So I just remember we're all set up, getting ready to hit record, and in walks Mick Jagger. So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to wake up at any moment here, and I'm going to be like, in Wappingers.
Yeah, right.
This isn't real, but it's okay. Let's go. We hit record. One of the few times that I did something on one take. I must have been concentrating so hard. But during the course of this 4-minute song, I'm playing and I could see in the reflection of the control room glass, Jagger's behind me dancing around like a child on Christmas morning.
Is that right?
And I'm going, you know, this whole like cacophony is going on in my alleged brain. And I'm thinking, I'm playing and I'm going, that's why he's Mick Jagger. There's no audience here, but look at the amount of joy he has.
And enthusiasm.
And listening to music.
Yeah.
And that was a profound moment to me, because it's like, okay, that's a real musician.
Yep.
That's a musician like Louis Armstrong, like Benny Goodman, like, you know, those guys were musicians to the core.
Yep.
You know, and there again, that's eat, drink, sleep music. He was doing it, I could see it, and it was Mick Jagger. So we finished up, and they did end up using my track, which was wonderful. After that, the Stones were doing a album called Dirty Work, and Mick and Keith were kind of feuding, and I got a call from Mick, and he said, you know, you want to come down and have a play on the record? Again, it's like, this can't be happening.
Wow.
So, got in the car, met him at his place on West End Avenue. At the time, he was with Jerry Hall.
Yes.
You know, I go in, this, you know, beautiful 5-story brownstone, and he goes, I'm going to go take a shower. This is the track I want you to play on, you know, write a chart out, which is where the ear training, thank God, came in.
Right.
I didn't have anything to plunk on, so I did it. Again, I'm pinching myself. I'm looking around going, this isn't happening. So we get in the car. We go to Ray Track Studios on 48th Street. Ray Track was on the second floor, so you had to get buzzed in, which will come into play in the next part of this story. So we go upstairs. Steve Lillywhite was producing the record, and they put on a track called Winning Ugly. And I ended up playing on the whole track. So I was like, great. So I said, I got another one. You want to work? I said, are you kidding me? So I put on One Hit to the Body, which I fixed the part in the middle. And now it's probably around 1 in the morning. And this call comes through, and it's like, I see the producer, and he puts the phone down, and he goes, we got to leave. Keith's on his way, and he's got a gun. And this is how serious this feud was.
Wow.
They were actually, whatever one of them was recording, the other one coming in a race, and I mean, they were having a serious feud.
Wow.
So they shut this thing down. We went out the upstairs down the fire escape. We didn't even go down the elevator.
Did you really?
And they had guys spying on each other. So when Keith left the house, Mick knew.
Oh my God.
So it was just, it was surrealistic. But that leads to more work, and I'm just so grateful that we got to come up in a time where it was so much fun, and there was so much camaraderie and work available, and everybody looked out for everybody else. I don't remember anybody being cutthroat back then.
No.
It was a fraternity. You know, I just hope and pray that somehow the support for live music
continues.
Grows. And,
sure.
You know, but it needs to grow, because it's kind of dwindled off from the days that we're talking about.
Yes.
So there's no better place, there's no better way to spend an evening than go listening to live music.
Right now you have more musical knowledge available to you. I mean, you can watch music events from, 40 years ago and from last night on YouTube. They're up that quick. I mean, there's times that, fairly much every night that I play, by the time I get home from my gig, it's already on Facebook. Yeah. Someone's already uploaded. So you better be playing good. That's number one. If you're going to go out and play, right, you better play good. But like I said earlier, you need to, develop your diversity. You need to understand what it takes to get people to come out and see you. You need to understand what the owners are going through, if they're even bothering to sponsor and have live music in their venue. Right. I find that the owners that continue to have live music on a regular basis are just music fans. They're not looking to make a lot of money from it, but we all grew up in that time where there was just live music.
I asked Tony DeVillio.
Any regrets about Lee leaving school? He said, no. He goes, Gary, I knew as a teenager this was going to be my life no matter where it took me. This was going to be my life. And I didn't have that conviction as much as he did. Now, I don't know whether, I was at a very successful career, but I always tell kids that I mentor, I don't know the answer to that. I said, because Tony DeVillio is one of hundreds that has made it, as opposed to the other people who I know that did that and they never made it.
Right.
And they have nothing.
Right.
You know, so I don't know which way to go.
Anytime you want to be purely creative, you're battling. You're battling from start to finish, from the day that you decide to do it, probably until the day you die. Musicians today, they teach at colleges. They have adjuncts at colleges, they're professors, they're part-time professors. A lot of jazz musicians do that because they have to get their benefits and they have to get their salaries. You can't survive on just touring. There's not enough. So the most important thing is you love it. If you don't feel it in your heart, it's not going to work.
Do it because you love music, not for the money.
Right.
And yet rest will come. You know, if you have your business thing together, that's important. And you know, just be ready to don't be egotistical enough to say that you're too good to do any given thing when you're first coming up. Accept whatever you can.
If they were really passionate about music and they want to be a musician, then they have to delve themselves and give it 100%. And for those that are really truly a musician, there's really no other path for them.
Don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to get some sort of information. And understand this, when I say learn, I don't mean go to a school. I don't mean try to get into the actor's studio or anything like that. That your life is an education. You can get an education walking down the street. You want some character study? Go outside.
45 plus years, I'm still learning how to play. You know, I mean,
right.
You know,
right.
And when I'm all done and, you know, they throw me in the ground or whatever they do with me, I still won't know everything. So to me, that's what keeps you going, is there's so much more to learn. It's like, why wouldn't, it's a lifetime of learning.
Right.
Why would you want something that you could just, and you know it?
I would say just you got to get out there and play. You got to get yourself exposed. You got to, right now with all social media and anything like that, put anything you can out there once you think it's worthy of putting it out. And then hopefully that exposure will garner some attention by someone who might need a guitar player and say, hey, that guy's a pretty good guitar player. I'll call him for a gig here and there.
Again, do it because you can't not do it.
Yep.
That's the way we did it.
Yes,
right?
exactly right.
That's it.
The thing that I think they really need to work on as a young musician is be engaging with the audience and think about the audience coming to see you. And it's not just about you. And that helps a lot, wanting to get people to come back to see you. Even though we all play gigs and there might be a sold out show one night and the next night you go and 6 people show up, and we're trying to be as engaging as possible.
When you realize you can touch somebody with what you do, it makes a big difference. And it doesn't have to be millions of people on TV. It could be that one person that you're singing for and you bring back a memory. You keep it real. Because my one uncle always used to say, remember who you are. Because growing up in the community, and probably that's why I haven't moved out of the community, you get to know a lot of people, people know you, and you have that connection.
God bless you all. Keep playing. Keep rocking.